Jiang Haoyi was just an ordinary 19-year-old high school student. His school life was simple. Wake up in the morning, head to school, and that was it. Haoyi liked living this way, a peaceful life where no one paid him much attention. It felt free and calm, and he thought it would be enough if things stayed like that forever. One day, while Haoyi was in class studying, a beautiful girl suddenly entered his classroom. Her name was Zitao. The male students were shocked by her unexpected appearance. Everyone wondered why Zitao had come to their class and couldn't help but admire her figure. Out of nowhere, Zitao grabbed Haoyi's hand while he was daydreaming. Haoyi was stunned and couldn't understand why Zitao was holding his hand. To his surprise, Zitao looked embarrassed. She placed Haoyi's hand on her stomach and declared that she was pregnant with his baby. Haoyi was dumbfounded. He couldn't comprehend what Zitao was saying. His classmates immediately erupted in anger, shocked that someone like Haoyi could have wronged a girl like Zitao. Cameras flashed as they took pictures of him, and some even called him a scumbag. Everyone was in disbelief that Haoyi could do something so outrageous. Zitao claimed that Haoyi's baby in her belly was already 3 months old and asked if he could feel it when he touched her stomach. Furious, Haoyi told her to stop talking as if it were true. He demanded to know who she really was and why she was claiming to be pregnant with his child since he didn't even know her. His classmates didn't believe his protests. They were livid and even threatened him. Desperate, Haoyi pleaded for a chance to explain, but Zitao cut him off. She told him there was no need to explain anything because she and their baby trusted him. Frustrated, Haoyi grabbed Zitao's hand and dragged her out, telling her they needed to talk somewhere else. News about Zitao's pregnancy quickly spread online, and Haoyi became the center of everyone's ridicule. Wherever he went, people followed him, calling him names and shouting insults. Haoyi had to hide just to get away from all the chaos. While he was hiding, Zitao suddenly appeared in front of him with a smile. She teased him, saying the baby in her belly told her that Haoyi's legs were short and he ran too slowly. She even warned him to be careful around her. Exhausted, Haoyi begged her to stop with the nonsense. That same day, the school broadcast system called for Haoyi to report to the teacher's office immediately. Feeling like he was in serious trouble, Haoyi told Zitao to wait for him on the rooftop. As he ran to the office, his classmates swarmed him, chasing him down the hallway. Strangely, Zitao watched from afar and thought Haoyi looked incredibly cool while being pursued. The students continued their chase, throwing objects at him to try and stop him. Confused about why they wouldn't let up, Haoyi spotted the janitor's cleaning supplies. Without hesitation, he grabbed a mop and stood his ground. The students laughed, mocking him for holding nothing but a mop handle. However, Haoyi threw the handle, knocking down several students in one hit. They groaned in pain, shocked by the unexpected attack. Haoyi argued that he was forced to do it since they wouldn't leave him alone. Suddenly, someone pulled him into the girls' restroom. It was Tang Suan, the sports captain, and her friends. They beat him up mercilessly. Suan demanded that Haoyi explain the news that had gone viral online. Haoyi insisted that he didn't know anything. Furious, Suan accused him of being heartless and not understanding her pain. Instead of responding, Haoyi's eyes drifted towards Suan's chest, and she punched him immediately. Annoyed, Suan reminded him that he used to call her by name when they were together, yet now he acted like he didn't know her. Her friends questioned why Suan never told them about Haoyi before. They were angry at Haoyi for making Suan cry and prepared to beat him up again. However, Suan stopped them, saying it was between her and Haoyi and they shouldn't interfere. Suan leaned down close to Haoyi, her voice suddenly soft and sweet. She told him to come clean about his relationship with Zitao, or she would do something much worse to him. Haoyi sat there, completely overwhelmed, unsure of how to escape the chaos surrounding him. Haoyi couldn't understand why Suan was doing this to him. Still, he insisted that he really wasn't close to Zitao. Hearing that, Suan hit Haoyi again. When the restroom door finally opened, Suan and her group walked out with Haoyi trailing behind them. Outside, the students were still waiting for him. Just as Haoyi stepped out, Lin Yuan, the smartest student in school, suddenly appeared, ran toward him, and hugged him tightly. Haoyi was bewildered, unsure of what was about to happen next. Yuan told Haoyi to come home with her because Xiaohong and Xiaoming missed him so much. Haoyi was completely confused. He had no idea who Xiaohong and Xiaoming were. Without warning, Yuan hit him with a book, calling him a traitor for cheating on her, even forgetting their 2 children. Just as Yuan was about to hit him even harder, Suan intervened, grabbing Yuan's hand in time. Suan declared that she was the only one allowed to do that to Haoyi. Annoyed, Yuan snapped back, saying that since the earth was formed, Hao Yi was destined to be hers. Students around them started snapping pictures of the argument between Yuan and Suan. While they were busy fighting, Hao Yi saw an opportunity and bolted. One of the students quickly noticed him escaping and alerted the others that Hao Yi was running away. Hao Yi ran for his life, but no matter where he went, people were chasing after him. With no choice, he dashed up the emergency stairs and headed to the rooftop. Zitao was already waiting for him there. Meanwhile, the students continued to chase him up to the roof, followed closely by Yuan and Suan. Yuan stopped abruptly when she saw Zitao standing there. Suan, on the other hand, demanded that Hao Yi explain everything immediately. Feeling overwhelmed, Hao Yi was cornered by everyone, especially those three girls. He didn't even understand what was happening anymore. Desperate, Hao Yi shouted that he didn't know any of the three girls. He walked all the way to the edge of the rooftop and threatened to jump off to prove his innocence. However, the crowd, already furious with him, charged forward to grab him. Left with no other choice, Hao Yi let himself off the building. As he fell through the air, Hao Yi thought the nightmare would finally end and it would all be over. But to his shock, something strange happened. A mysterious force emerged from the sky. Everything around him froze, and Hao Yi realized that time itself had stopped. Suddenly, he saw a beautiful girl appear in front of him. She looked at him and said he seemed way too calm while falling. She had actually hoped he would wet his pants. The girl introduced herself as the goddess of love and immediately asked Hao Yi if he had ever eaten a love chocolate. Confused, Hao Yi was thrown off by her words. He wondered if she was referring to a cake he had eaten before. He remembered seeing a piece of cake on the rooftop, possibly left there by someone. Since it would have been a waste to leave it, he decided to eat it. The goddess of love explained that the chocolate cake he ate had the power to make anyone fall in love. If Hao Yi ate it with a girl, then that girl would fall in love with him. Hao Yi was horrified as he realized he had shared the cake with the girls, and now they were all after him. He couldn't believe something so ridiculous was happening to him. Still in disbelief, Hao Yi asked himself if the goddess of love really existed in this world. But there she was, right in front of him as he fell from the rooftop. The goddess of love introduced herself as Mai Tata, explaining that she was still in training. Tata told Hao Yi he didn't need to thank her, and cheekily added that he should enjoy the happiness of being surrounded by women. Frustrated, Hao Yi snapped at Tata, yelling that his peaceful life had been completely ruined because of her. He told her that if he hadn't run away, he might have been killed, or worse, expelled and forced to become homeless. Hao Yi felt like his life was over. Tata, unimpressed, called him dramatic and insisted that his problems weren't impossible to fix. As long as Hao Yi could fulfill their wishes, the magic would disappear and Hao Yi would finally be free from them. According to Tata, it was really simple. Suddenly, Tata caught a whiff of food and was distracted. Hao Yi, irritated, said that if it was so easy, she should do it herself. Time, which had been stopped, resumed once again. The students chasing Hao Yi were in disbelief that he had actually jumped off the building. They rushed to check below, but he was nowhere to be found. They kept searching. Suan was baffled about where Hao Yi could have gone. She looked around but still didn't find him, and in the process, she bumped into Yuan. The tension between Suan and Yuan flared again as their rivalry over Hao Yi grew. Meanwhile, Hao Yi was hiding behind a tree, catching his breath as he scanned for Zitao. He was worried something terrible might happen to her. He imagined Zitao crying over him, heartbroken that he had so many other women in his life, and wondering what would happen to the baby she claimed to be carrying. Zitao, still on the rooftop, was indeed crying. When Hao Yi finally reached her, panting, Zitao was shocked but relieved to see he was okay. Hao Yi told her to meet him somewhere tomorrow. Zitao smiled and teasingly asked if this meant he was asking her out on a date. The next day, Hao Yi took Zitao to a hospital for a checkup. As they sat in the waiting room, people gave them judgmental looks. Some whispered about how kids these days had no self-control and caused all sorts of problems. Zitao leaned on Hao Yi's shoulder, and Hao Yi, staring at her, realized how cute she looked up close. Zitao asked him to take her to get the test results. Before Hao Yi could respond, Zitao commented on how kind he was and said she was sure he would make a great dad someday. The doctor suddenly appeared with the results, confirming there was no baby in Zitao's stomach. Hao Yi was ecstatic to hear this. Zitao, however, was puzzled, insisting she had felt a baby inside her. She quickly concluded it was her fault and vowed to try harder next time to get pregnant. She even suggested they buy something to speed up the process, claiming she knew all about it. Hao Yi quickly changed the subject, suggesting they visit her family to clear things up. When they arrived at Zitao's house, Hao Yi was stunned. The place was a grand mansion, practically a castle. Servants greeted Zitao, addressing her as princess. That was when Hao Yi realized Zitao came from an incredibly wealthy family. Hao Yi couldn't wrap his head around why someone as perfect as Zitao wanted him to fulfill her wishes. Zitao told Hao Yi she would always remember this day as the day he came to propose to her. Hao Yi couldn't even fathom it. Even in his wildest imagination, he was still a loser. He silently acknowledged that his life was nothing but a mess. Zitao, on the other hand, said that even if her father rejected him, she'd still be happy because Hao Yi at least tried. A maid arrived to greet Zitao and asked who Hao Yi was. Zitao was about to call him her boyfriend, but Hao Yi quickly covered her mouth. He introduced himself as a close friend of Zitao's father instead. The maid greeted Hao Yi warmly. Hao Yi was taken aback to learn that Zitao lived alone. The maid explained that Zitao's father worked abroad and never returned home, and she pitied Zitao for it. Hao Yi then decided it would be better to leave since Zitao's father wasn't around. However, the maid insisted that Hao Yi stay, saying Zitao specifically asked him not to leave. Just then, one of Zitao's guards arrived with news from the school. The school had called and reported that a student named Hao Yi had kidnapped Zitao. Hearing this, Hao Yi began sneaking out of the house, trying to make his escape. The maid said that Hao Yi's name sounded familiar to her. Zitao's guards, however, were furious at Hao Yi and prepared to beat him up. Hao Yi pleaded with them, insisting that they had misunderstood the situation, but the maid urged them to attack him anyway. Hao Yi ended up getting severely beaten. Zitao arrived just in time and ordered her guards to release Hao Yi, declaring that she and Hao Yi were in love. The guards hesitated momentarily, but one of them scoffed and said that if Zitao truly loved someone like Hao Yi, the world might as well be ending. He instructed the others to finish Hao Yi off. Once again, Hao Yi was brutally attacked. Zitao shouted that she didn't care if Hao Yi was poor or unemployed. Even if the best he could do was support her as a scavenger, she would still marry him. Despite her words, the guards showed no mercy and continued to pummel Hao Yi. Through her tears, Zitao vowed to try harder next time, even though she wasn't pregnant anymore. She encouraged Hao Yi to give it his best tomorrow as well. Hearing this, the guards became even more enraged and intensified their assault on Hao Yi. Zitao finally pleaded with them to stop torturing Hao Yi. By now, Hao Yi had been thrown against a wall and gasping for air, begged Zitao to stop talking. Zitao quickly pulled Hao Yi to his feet and dragged him into her room, slamming the door shut behind them. The guards pounded relentlessly on Zitao's door, demanding to know what Hao Yi was doing inside. Zitao refused to open it and declared that her love for Hao Yi was pure and true. Hao Yi panicked, clamped his hand over Zitao's mouth, begging her to stop shouting. The guards outside kept banging on the door, warning Zitao not to fall for Hao Yi's tricks. Meanwhile, Hao Yi let out a frustrated sigh and accidentally noticed an old calendar sitting on Zitao's desk. On the calendar was a note marking the best day ever, the day she had lunch with her father. The guards continued to hammer on the door, while the maid called Zitao's father to report the incident. However, her father brushed it off, saying it didn't matter as long as Zitao was safe. He even told the maid to stop bothering him with such trivial issues. In a sudden burst of determination, Hao Yi flung the door open and snatched the maid's phone. He yelled into it, declaring that he was the one who had kidnapped Zitao and daring her father to come meet him. The guards, surprisingly impressed by Hao Yi's courage, decided to prepare a meal for him so he wouldn't be hungry when meeting Zitao's father. Not long after, 2 helicopters landed in the yard and several cars arrived to secure the property's entrance. Hao Yi braced himself, convinced that wealth could only be achieved through hard work. He knew he had come too far to back down now. Zitao's father finally arrived at the house, greeted with reverence by the guards as they lined up to welcome him. Zitao's father arrived in front of his house with his subordinates, and all the bodyguards respectfully greeted him. Hao Yi could feel the intimidating aura emanating from Zitao's father. Zitao's father remarked that Hao Yi was quite bold for summoning him. He then ordered his subordinates to keep an eye on Hao Yi. Hao Yi, feeling relieved that perhaps nothing would happen, quickly had his hopes dashed when Zitao's father commanded his men to teach Hao Yi a lesson. Once again, Hao Yi was surrounded and beaten up. Zitao tried to intervene, telling her father that Hao Yi was innocent. She showed him the results of her checkup, proving that she wasn't pregnant. This made Zitao's father stop his men, and he turned to Hao Yi, asking about his true intentions. Hao Yi then asked if he hadn't claimed to have kidnapped Zitao, would Zitao's father have come home to see her at all, or would he have just continued forgetting about her? Zitao's father was shocked by Hao Yi's words, and Zitao herself was deeply moved. Hao Yi continued, explaining that Zitao still needed her father, but her father couldn't see that. While Zitao's father had given her a luxurious house, personal bodyguards, and servants, and ensured she never went hungry, was that really what Zitao wanted? Hao Yi passionately argued that what Zitao truly desired was her father's love. Did you ever give her that love? Hao Yi shouted. Zitao was overwhelmed with emotion at Hao Yi's words. Zitao's father, furious, grabbed Hao Yi by the collar and yelled, "What do you know about love? Do you think money grows on trees?" Hao Yi pleaded with him to stop hurting his own family. He then showed Zitao's father a calendar from the previous year, marked as Zitao's best day. It made her father remember a joyful moment they'd shared together during a simple lunch. It dawned on him that what Zitao wanted most was to be with him. To others, that moment might not have seemed like much, but to Zitao, it was her biggest dream. Hao Yi asked Zitao's father to think it over. Even the maids and bodyguards were moved to tears by Hao Yi's sincerity. They praised him, saying he was a truly good person. Hao Yi then said his goodbyes, running off quickly in an attempt to escape. However, it turned out he was just running in circles and ended up right back where he started. Zitao caught up to him and placed a hand on his shoulder. Confused, Hao Yi asked how she caught up so fast. Zitao replied that she had simply taken the back door. Zitao thanked Hao Yi and kissed him, but suddenly, she disappeared. Hao Yi was stunned and wondered what had just happened. Had Zitao vanished? Out of nowhere, Tata appeared, explaining that Zitao hadn't disappeared. Instead, her magic had worn off. Tata congratulated Hao Yi for fulfilling Zitao's wish. Meanwhile, Zitao lay asleep in her bedroom. Her father approached her and asked if she'd like to have lunch with him. Tata admitted she was surprised Hao Yi resolved everything so quickly. Hao Yi grumbled that he simply hated overly complicated problems. He left in a hurry, muttering that his life had nearly ended because of Zitao, but was thankfully resolved in just 2 days. At least he didn't have to see Zitao sad anymore. Tata smiled at Hao Yi's seriousness. The next day, on his way to school, Hao Yi tripped and found a flyer that featured him being sought after as Yuan's husband. Flyers were scattered everywhere around the school. Hao Yi was dumbfounded and wondered what on earth was happening now. He didn't know when all this trouble would finally end, and even compared himself to the legendary king of a harem who achieved eternal happiness, if only that were true for him. Trying to avoid attention, Hao Yi covered his face and crept toward his classroom. He even resorted to crawling to his seat. Meanwhile, a girl was seen searching for Hao Yi, eventually discovering which class he was in. Hao Yi finally made it to his desk, but suddenly caught a familiar fragrance. He looked up to see Zitao standing in front of him, asking if he wanted to go out with her. Hao Yi was shocked and asked how Zitao could remember him. She smiled and replied, "How could I ever forget you?" She then thanked Hao Yi for everything he had done for her. Panicking, Hao Yi called out for Tata, who immediately appeared, freezing time. Hao Yi demanded to know what was going on, pointing out that Tata herself had said Zitao's magic had disappeared once her wish was fulfilled. Tata sheepishly admitted that she had forgotten to tell him something because he had left too quickly the day before. When the love magic ended, the enchanted memories also disappeared, but normal memories remained intact. Everything that happened during those 2 days would not be forgotten by Zitao, which meant that whatever feelings Zitao had for Hao Yi came from her heart alone. Before Hao Yi could complain to Tata about all the trouble, Tata suddenly disappeared and time resumed as normal. Just as Zitao was about to ask why Hao Yi had mentioned Tata, Hao Yi quickly brushed it off, saying it was nothing important. Zitao concluded that Hao Yi had agreed to go out with her. Out of nowhere, someone appeared and threw a knife that narrowly missed Hao Yi. The girl's name was Aishen Shili. She called Hao Yi honey and asked why he hadn't invited her on his date. Shili then interrogated Hao Yi about his relationship with Zitao. Terrified, Hao Yi stammered that it was all a misunderstanding. Shili, however, declared that she would clear up the misunderstanding herself. Without warning, she kissed Hao Yi fiercely on the lips, shocking their classmates, who shouted about how daring the two of them were. Shili then smugly asked Zitao if she understood now that Hao Yi belonged to her. Hao Yi, rendered helpless by Shili, desperately asked for help. Just then, Shili's mother appeared and smacked a bag into Shili's face, telling her to stop what she was doing. Shili, still recovering, asked what her mother was doing there. Her mother was stunned that Shili had traveled all the way from America just to see Hao Yi. Hao Yi nervously greeted Shili's mother, but both Shili and her mother immediately told him to be quiet. Shili's mother demanded that Shili return home, but Shili refused, boldly claiming that no one could stop her from being with Hao Yi. Shili's mother, clearly disapproving of her daughter's relationship with Hao Yi, insisted that Shili give up on him. The two began to fight right in front of everyone. Shili's mother easily won, leaving Shili lying on the ground completely defeated. The students wasted no time snapping photos of the spectacle. Shili's mother ordered her subordinates to take Shili away immediately. As she was about to leave, Hao Yi nervously asked if she was really going to take Shili back to America. Shili's mother simply replied, inviting someone and asking them to leave are two very different things. She then ominously advised Hao Yi to consider buying insurance. Terrified, Hao Yi muttered that his life might soon come to an end. As he turned around, Tata suddenly appeared in front of him, startling him. Frustrated, Hao Yi scolded Tata for sneaking up on him and told her not to pop out of nowhere like a ghost. Despite calling her sweet-looking like a goddess, he grumbled that her behavior was as scary as a ghost. From a distance, Zitao noticed Hao Yi seemingly talking to himself and wondered what he was doing. Curious, she approached him. Meanwhile, Tata asked Hao Yi if Shili had also eaten the magic chocolate. Hao Yi sighed, saying that Shili had always been like that, his scariest childhood friend. According to Hao Yi's parents, Shili and he had played together since they were babies, and they even went to the same grade school and middle school. Just thinking about it made Hao Yi's head hurt. Suddenly, Hao Yi felt someone behind him. Zitao, in a panic, tried to hide behind 3 leaves, which was of course useless because Hao Yi could still see her clearly. Embarrassed, Zitao said she didn't want to interfere with Hao Yi and Shili's relationship since they were childhood friends. Gathering her courage, Zitao told Hao Yi to forget about their plans for tomorrow, but Hao Yi, confused, said he had forgotten to discuss the time and place for their meeting. Apologizing, he admitted he wasn't good at choosing locations and asked Zitao to let him know if she had a place in mind. Hearing that, Zitao smiled and walked away. Tata, watching everything unfold, commented that Hao Yi seemed to be starting to like Zitao after everything they had been through. Annoyed, Hao Yi shot back that it was all Tata's fault for setting this up in the first place. He warned Tata to stop following him and stormed off. Hao Yi made his way toward the school rooftop, trying to clear his head. But on the stairs, he bumped into Suan. Without a word, Suan slapped him and ordered him to follow her immediately. Hao Yi ran into Suan on the stairs and Suan immediately slapped him. She coldly declared that their relationship was over. Hao Yi, unfazed, responded that he didn't care if they'd broke up and added that with such a harsh attitude, no one would ever like Suan. Furious, Suan stormed off, leaving Hao Yi stressed and frustrated. Tata appeared moments later, asking what had happened to Hao Yi in the short time she'd been gone. Hao Yi explained that he had just been slapped and dumped by Suan. Even though Suan's feelings were fake, suddenly being dumped like that still made him upset. Hao Yi then asked Tata why Suan had decided to break up. Was it because the problem wasn't resolved? Tata smirked and said that Hao Yi clearly didn't understand women. She explained that when most women ask for a breakup, it's usually a warning sign. Tata then disappeared before Hao Yi could respond, leaving him worried that something terrible might happen to Suan. He even wondered if she might be planning to hurt herself. Later that afternoon, Hao Yi saw Suan punishing a group of boys by making them do push-ups. They looked utterly exhausted, struggling to complete the hundreds of push-ups Suan demanded. She scolded them, saying they deserved this punishment for losing a bet to the girls. One of the boys begged for forgiveness, promising they wouldn't underestimate her again. Instead of forgiving him, Suan sprayed him with water. Tata and Hao Yi watched the whole thing from a distance. Tata remarked that Suan was truly oppressive, managing to stay completely unfazed despite just having broken up. Seeing how bad the situation was, Hao Yi decided he had to step in and save the poor boys. Tata teased him, pointing out that he could barely save himself. Hao Yi approached Suan, trying to reason with her. He told her that it was just a bet and there was no need to push them so hard. Suan scoffed, mocking Hao Yi for daring to confront her after what had happened between them. The boys cheered Hao Yi on, calling him their savior, but Suan quickly silenced them by spraying them with water again. In a panic, Hao Yi grabbed the water sprayer from Suan, but in the struggle, he accidentally sprayed her instead, soaking her completely. Frozen in fear, Hao Yi braced himself, convinced that Suan would kill him. But instead, Suan looked at him and said that he was far too kind and loved everyone too much. She finally realized why Hao Yi couldn't stay loyal. With that, Suan turned and walked away. The boys, now free from Suan's punishment, celebrated Hao Yi's arrival. They couldn't believe he had the courage to stand up to her, considering how terrifying she was. Suan, meanwhile, headed to the bathroom to clean up. As she washed, she couldn't stop thinking about Hao-yi, muttering to herself that he was trash who didn't deserve her love. Determined to move on, she told herself that everything was over and tomorrow would be a fresh start. The next day, Hao-yi overslept and woke up to find Shili lying on his bed. Shocked, he asked what she was doing in his room. Shili, unfazed, called him honey and told him to get up already. She asked why he was in such a hurry since it was Sunday. Then she playfully asked if Hao-yi had a date to go on. Hao-yi replied that he planned to buy some books and finish his school assignments. Hearing that, Shili left the room and locked the door behind her. Panicking, Hao-yi shouted that he didn't want to be trapped in his room on the day of his first date, but Shili calmly told him to relax and stay at home. In the living room, Shili ran into Hao-yi's parents. They asked where Hao-yi was, and Shili told them that he wanted to stay home and study. She also claimed that Hao-yi had asked her to buy some books for him. To ensure her plan worked, she asked them not to unlock Hao-yi's door. Hao-yi's mother, clearly suspicious, turned to her husband and said that their son was being seduced and asked why he wasn't advising him. Hao-yi's father shrugged it off, saying it wasn't such a bad thing to have a girl taking care of him. Annoyed, Hao-yi's mother compared him to Yun and scolded him for being so careless. Trying to change the subject, Hao-yi's father commented on how good the tea tasted. Meanwhile, Hao-yi pounded on his bedroom door, shouting for someone to let him out, but no one responded. Desperate, he climbed out the window and tried to sneak along the building's ledge. As he passed by the neighbor's window, the young child inside started crying and accused Hao-yi of being a pervert sneaking around. Hao-yi, exasperated, yelled back that he wasn't a pervert. He just needed to borrow their door to escape. Meanwhile, Zitao was still waiting for Hao-yi at the place they had agreed to meet. She had been waiting for quite a while and suddenly began to feel worried, especially since she couldn't stop thinking about the time Shili kissed Hao-yi in class the day before. She remembered how Shili had declared that Hao-yi belonged to her, and the fact that Hao-yi and Shili were childhood friends only made things worse. Zitao started to believe their meeting was no longer happening. Out of nowhere, Hao-yi came running toward her, apologizing for being late because of everything that had happened at home. Zitao smiled and said it was okay, adding that she had just arrived as well. She then invited Hao-yi to have some tea with her. Hao-yi didn't expect Zitao to invite him for something as simple as tea. He had secretly hoped that she called him out to confess her feelings. Zitao, on the other hand, felt nervous and unsure whether she should say something. She was completely flustered, not knowing what to say because it was her first time going on a date with a guy. Her heart was pounding so hard that she worried Hao-yi might notice. Suddenly, Hao-yi placed his hand on Zitao's forehead to check if she was sick because her face had turned red. Without realizing it, their faces were so close that they found themselves staring straight into each other's eyes. Surprised, they quickly pulled back. Hao-yi apologized and Zitao, blushing even more, said that she was fine. Both of them looked away awkwardly, trying to hide how embarrassed they were. Out of the blue, Hao-yi remembered that there was an anime and manga festival happening that day. He excitedly asked Zitao if she wanted to check it out with him. Hearing that, Zitao smiled brightly and agreed. Meanwhile, Shili returned to Hao-yi's room, bringing him the books she had promised. But when she got there, she found the room empty. Thinking that Hao-yi was playing hide and seek with her, Shili muttered that she wouldn't let him win. At the festival, there were tons of visitors gathered around taking pictures of 3 cosplayers. They were chatting in a way that sounded like they were mocking Suan. It seemed like they didn't like her very much. As Zitao and Hao-yi walked past, many visitors turned to stare at Zitao, captivated by her beauty. Zitao really wanted to hold Hao-yi's hand, but she couldn't bring herself to do it. Hao-yi also wished Zitao would hold his hand, and for a moment, he thought about taking the initiative himself. But the crowd was too overwhelming, and the moment never felt quite right. Suddenly, a group of people came rushing through, shouting Suan's name. The crowd was so frantic that they bumped into Zitao, who nearly fell. Thankfully, Hao-yi quickly caught her before she hit the ground. Hao-yi was shocked to see that all these people were flocking to take pictures of Suan, the same Suan who had dumped him just the day before. At the festival, Suan looked incredibly sweet and charming, completely different from the strong and brash version of her at school. When Suan turned around and noticed Hao-yi standing there, she froze in shock. She hadn't expected to see him at the festival. At the anime and manga festival, Suan was cosplaying when she suddenly spotted Hao-yi arriving at the event. She wanted to chase after him, but the large crowd of visitors taking pictures of her made it hard to get away. Eventually, Suan managed to approach Hao Yi and immediately asked why he came to the festival. Was it just to make fun of her? Out of nowhere, Zitao called out to Hao Yi, saying that the visitors at the festival were really scary. They kept taking photos, which made Zitao anxious. Suddenly, Suan noticed some of her sports club members at the festival, so she quickly grabbed Hao Yi and Zitao to move them somewhere else. In the middle of the situation, Suan had no choice but to flash a sweet smile at the visitors, calling out her name. The crowd nearly fainted from how adorable she looked. Meanwhile, Shili had just arrived at the festival entrance. She was carrying a sword, and the visitors were in awe, thinking she was a cosplayer because she looked so cool. However, Shili wasn't there for fun. She came looking for Hao Yi, knowing he couldn't escape her. Suan pulled Hao Yi and Zitao into a room to avoid being seen by her sports club members. Hao Yi teased Suan, saying he didn't expect her to enjoy cosplay and that it actually suited her. Suan got annoyed, snapping back that Hao Yi was still making fun of her. Hao Yi denied it, saying he wasn't mocking her, he was complimenting her. Suan then covered Hao Yi's mouth and grumbled that she wouldn't be hiding like this if it weren't for him. Hao Yi asked why she needed to hide since she looked cute. Hearing this, Zitao began to think that maybe Hao Yi had a thing for cat costumes. Suan then admitted that she didn't actually like doing this. Ever since she started school, the girls in their class were constantly harassed by the boys. At first, the boys were just staring at the pretty girls. But then two girls who weren't particularly attractive and were more muscular showed up. The boys immediately chased those two girls away. It didn't stop there. The boys continued to bully them, calling them ugly and claiming they were full of viruses. The two girls were insulted, splashed with water, and treated like trash. They ended up crying because they couldn't stand the bullying anymore. Seeing this, Suan was furious and immediately stepped in to teach the boys a lesson. She fought off the boys, which left the two bullied girls amazed. Suan then asked them if they didn't want to fight back. The two girls said Suan was incredible and that they wanted to follow her. From that day on, Suan protected the girls at school. Everyone started to see her as a role model, so she couldn't let them see her in cute outfits like this. If they ever did, they'd feel disappointed, thinking she was just messing with them. They would probably abandon her, leaving her completely alone. Hao Yi pointed out that even though Suan's intentions were good, she was still hiding her true self from others. He told her that she should show people who she really was instead of living in hiding like this. Suan shot back, saying someone like Hao Yi would never understand her feelings. She then called him a Capricorn and added that she absolutely hated him. Confused, Hao Yi asked what being a Capricorn had to do with anything. Suddenly, an announcement came over the loudspeaker saying that the 12th River City Women's Competition was about to start. Zitao quickly reminded them that the cosplay competition seemed like it was starting soon. However, Suan said it was pointless because the competition required 3 participants to enter. If they didn't have 3 people, they couldn't compete, which was why she always came alone to defend her title. But now she no longer had the right to participate. Zitao seemed to understand the situation and then came up with an idea. Since they needed 3 people, she suggested that she and Hao Yi join Suan to compete together. Suan was surprised that such an idea could work. However, Hao Yi thought it was impossible since he was a guy. But Suan didn't care. She immediately dragged Hao Yi to the dressing room to get him ready as a female cosplayer. While they were busy transforming Hao Yi, Shili spotted them. With a bit of persuasion, Hao Yi finally transformed into an incredibly adorable female cosplayer. Suan commented that Hao Yi looked so pretty, even she felt jealous of him. Zitao also agreed, saying Hao Yi looked stunning. When Hao Yi stepped out of the dressing room and saw himself in the mirror, he was completely shocked by his appearance. He practiced greeting the visitors with cute gestures and introduced himself as Yi. However, he couldn't help but feel disgusted with himself for acting that way. Unbeknownst to him, Shili was snapping photos of him from afar. Annoyed at Hao Yi for lying to her, she still couldn't help but admire his cross-dressing. She thought it was so cute that she could just eat him up in one bite. Shili decided she had a new plan to have some fun with Hao Yi. Suddenly, Suan burst into tears after discovering that the outfit she planned to wear for the competition had been torn. Zitao wondered who could have done something so cruel to Suan. Hao Yi recalled that there were people who didn't want Suan to win, so they resorted to dirty tricks like this. Hao Yi asked Suan why she didn't just wear another outfit since this one was ruined. However, Suan misunderstood him, thinking he was implying that someone like her wasn't suited to wear something like that. Hao Yi immediately clarified that he didn't mean it that way, but Suan, now upset, snapped that she didn't need his pity. She cried and ran off, leaving Hao Yi calling after her, but he couldn't stop her. The ones who ruined Suwon's outfit were the same girls who had been gossiping about her in the lobby earlier. They had planned this sabotage so they could win the competition themselves. Haoyi asked Zitao if Suwon's outfit was expensive. Zitao explained that the first time Suwon won, it was because she wore a costume she had made herself, which was irreplaceable to her. Suwon dropped the torn outfit and ran outside. Haoyi finally understood why Suwon was so determined to protect her secret. She was very careful about how others saw her. At that moment, Suwon seemed to have lost the will to fight back, but what mattered most was that they still needed to participate in the competition and win it. While in the bathroom, Haoyi tried to recall what a cosplayer needed to do. First, introduce themselves, then showcase their unique appeal as the main attraction. He still hadn't found Suwon, and Zitao hadn't managed to find a suitable outfit yet. It seemed like Haoyi would have to go on stage first. Suddenly, Tata appeared, startling him. Haoyi reminded her that she was in the men's bathroom. Tata nonchalantly asked if Haoyi was having trouble. Haoyi asked her how he could win the cosplay competition and surprise everyone. An idea popped into his head as he thought about the concept of surprises, and he stared at Tata. Feeling awkward under Haoyi's gaze, Tata squirmed uncomfortably. The Anan cosplay competition for women finally began, and Haoyi, now introducing himself as Yai, had to go first. He felt a little nervous because the crowd was huge. Some girls mocked the silly name he used, asking if his stupid disguise was aiming for first place. They jeered at him, making fun of his efforts. Determined, Haoyi reassured himself that he could do this. As he stepped onto the stage, he felt incredibly nervous under the stares of the audience and the constant flash of cameras. He tried to greet them, but in his nervousness, he tripped and fell. The crowd erupted into laughter, calling him useless and pathetic. Haoyi froze for a moment, but then suddenly put on the cutest face he could muster, smiled sweetly, and told them to stop yelling at him. The entire crowd was stunned. They immediately started praising him, exclaiming how adorable he was. In an instant, they all fell for Haoyi's charm. The girls who had mocked him earlier realized that the competition wasn't just about scoring points. Popularity was what truly mattered. Haoyi had managed to win the crowd over. He promised himself that next time he'd do even better and left the rest to Suwon and Zitao. He wasn't going to give up. Meanwhile, Tata was searching for Suwon, but she was having a hard time because everyone at the event looked so similar. Zitao was still running around frantically, trying to find where Suwon had gone. Haoyi begged the host to give him more time to wait for his two friends. He kept pleading for just a little more time, but the host refused, saying that 3 groups had already performed and they couldn't keep delaying Haoyi's group. If this continued, Haoyi's group would be disqualified from the competition. The host urged Haoyi to resolve his group's issues quickly. He then announced that the next group to perform was Haoyi's. Haoyi stepped onto the stage and stood frozen for a moment, prompting the host to ask why he was just standing there. The crowd started chanting Suwon's name over and over. From above, Suwon could see Haoyi. Gathering his courage, Haoyi finally spoke up to calm everyone down. Then he began to sing in his cutest style. The audience loved it, but they continued shouting for Suwon, demanding that she appear on stage. Hearing the crowd scream for Suwon made Haoyi stop singing. Backstage, the 3 cosplayers who had sabotaged Suwon's costume were watching Haoyi perform. They were confident the audience would quickly grow bored of Haoyi's performance, even calling it a clown act. The audience kept shouting for Suwon to appear, and Haoyi pleaded with them to listen. He explained that he had come to the festival with a friend and said he thought Suwon was the one suffering the most. To avoid hurting anyone's feelings, Suwon always tried to hide her true self, but no one realized just how much she hid the things she loved. Haoyi went on, saying that he had seen how much Suwon truly enjoyed cosplaying. Though it shocked him at first, he wanted to tell Suwon that when she was in cosplay, she was the most confident and natural version of herself that he had ever seen. Haoyi then shouted, asking where Suwon was and if she could hear him. He begged her to come out. Suddenly, the railing above the stage broke and Suwon fell. The crowd gasped in fear, worried something terrible would happen to her. At that moment, time seemed to stop. Haoyi moved effortlessly, catching Suwon and pulling her into a hug. Miraculously, they both transformed into new costumes. The crowd erupted into cheers, amazed at Haoyi and Suwon's incredible appearance. People in the audience speculated that they must have had tons of sponsors and spent a fortune on their costumes. Cameras flashed non-stop as everyone took pictures of them. Haoyi turned to Suwon, asking if she was okay. The host announced that it looked like they already had their winner since the crowd's reaction was so enthusiastic. In the middle of the audience, Zitao watched Hao Yi and Suan's performance and admitted that it was truly amazing, though she couldn't help but feel a little sad that she wasn't the one up there. The host even joked that he never expected Hao Yi to know magic tricks. Suan looked at Hao Yi and said it didn't seem like magic at all, demanding that he explain what had really happened. Hao Yi, however, couldn't bring himself to tell her. Tata, watching from backstage, sighed in relief, grateful that everything had been done just in time. Meanwhile, Shili was watching Hao Yi and Suan from behind the stage, annoyed that Suan had suddenly gained so much confidence after Hao Yi changed her look. Calling Suan slag, Shili muttered that she wanted to cut Suan in half. Suddenly, Shili overheard some girls talking about Suan. They were surprised Suan had still performed even after they had torn her costume. They admitted that Hao Yi looked really cute and even discussed inviting Hao Yi to join their group next time. They couldn't stop gushing about how sweet Hao Yi was. Hearing this, Shili grew furious. Realizing that these girls were planning to steal Hao Yi, she decided to teach them a lesson. In the dressing room, Suan was visibly exhausted after the competition. Hao Yi asked her if she was okay, reminding her that they had won. Suan scolded Hao Yi for being in the women's dressing room and told him to leave. Hao Yi explained that his clothes were inside the room. Suan told him to wait outside and said she would change first. Hao Yi insisted that he should go first since he could change quickly, but Suan refused. They began bickering over who should change first. In the middle of their squabble, Suan shoved Hao Yi. Suddenly, they found themselves undressed and face to face. Suan froze for a moment before slapping Hao Yi across the face. Suan quickly shut the door, but Hao Yi shouted that his clothes were still inside. Without hesitation, Suan threw his clothes and shoes out at him, slammed the door shut again, and called him a pervert. Just then, Tata approached Hao Yi and asked if he was in trouble. Frustrated, Hao Yi snapped at her, asking how she could even ask such a question. After all, wasn't she the one who had caused all this mess? Tata froze in shock, only to realize Hao Yi was undressed. Embarrassed, she covered her eyes and told him to get dressed quickly out of respect for the goddess who had helped him. Hao Yi, still annoyed, blamed Tata for not warning him that the outfit would disappear after some time. Apologetic, Tata admitted she wasn't very skilled with magic and often made mistakes when nervous. She confessed she had the lowest rank among all her peers. Hao Yi softened and reassured Tata that it wasn't her fault. He admitted that if she hadn't shown up at the right moment, he wouldn't have been able to save Suan. Hao Yi then thanked Tata, acknowledging that it was thanks to her always watching over him. Tata found herself marveling at how strange humans could be. Zitao then approached Hao Yi, inviting him to head home. Hao Yi suddenly realized he had forgotten about her entirely. He asked if Suan would be joining them on the way back, but Suan told him to go ahead without her. Curious, Suan asked why Hao Yi would even consider inviting her to walk home with him. Little did she know 3 girls who had earlier sabotaged her outfit were trapped inside the wardrobe where she had changed. Apparently, Shili had locked them in there. Meanwhile, Hao Yi only escorted Zitao as far as the station because he had something else to do. Zitao assumed it must be related to Suan. Before parting ways, Zitao thanked Hao Yi for walking her to the station, saying she had a wonderful day. As she left, Hao Yi found himself thinking about how considerate Zitao was. Still, his mind wandered back to Suan. How was she doing? As Suan walked out of the building alone, Hao Yi suddenly called out to her. She turned around, scanning for the source of the voice. Spotting Hao Yi by himself, Suan asked where Zitao was. Hao Yi explained that he had sent Zitao home without him because there was something he wanted to talk about with Suan. Surprised, Suan asked if Hao Yi felt sorry for her. Without missing a beat, Hao Yi invited Suan to come over to his place and stay the night. Furious, Suan slapped Hao Yi across the face and called him a pervert. She ran off, shouting that she didn't want to talk to him ever again. As he rubbed his cheek, Hao Yi realized that the love spell on Suan must have worn off now that his wish had been fulfilled. Still, he wondered when Suan would ever show her true self. That night, Hao Yi arrived at a woman's house. When she opened the door, she immediately commented on how long it had been since Hao Yi had visited, especially at such a late hour. Smiling, she invited him inside.